The first thing she became aware of was the rustle of leaves dancing in the breeze. It sounded like a chorus of whispers, just beyond understanding. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting to see a familiar room or the outline of a bed, but her gaze met a canopy of towering trees. Shafts of golden morning light pierced through the leaves overhead, illuminating motes of dust that floated lazily in the air. She blinked once, twice, and then pushed herself up onto her elbows, feeling the rough texture of soil beneath her palms. Her head throbbed. She realized she had no idea who she was or how she had come to be lying in the middle of this forest. There was a dryness in her throat that made her choke for a moment, and she coughed softly, trying to clear it. She noticed the earth was cool against her skin, and when she looked down at her body, she saw she was wearing only a thin, tattered dress. The dress revealed her slender limbs and her light brown skin, though it was coated in a thin layer of dirt and bits of leaves. Strands of her dark hair tumbled over her shoulders. She pressed a hand to her forehead, attempting to quell the pounding in her skull. Her heart felt as though it was beating in her ears. Immediately, she tried to recall anything, her name, her home, her family, but there was only an empty darkness where her memories should have been. She rose slowly, testing her balance. The forest greeted her with the chirping of birds and the distant humming of insects. Towering mahogany and iroko trees surrounded her in every direction. Thick roots jutted out of the ground, creating small natural ridges, and the undergrowth was lush with plants that rustled whenever a breeze swept through. It felt as though every living creature in the forest had paused to observe her. A sharp hunger clutched at her stomach, but she realized she was far thirstier than she was hungry. Her lips felt parched, and her throat burned with dryness. She needed water. Squinting against the dappled sunlight, she scanned her surroundings, searching for any sign of a stream. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of flowing water, soft, gurgling, and inviting. It was enough of a clue to make her take her first steps. She gathered her courage, one foot after the other, stepping carefully over mossy rocks and twisted roots. She felt strangely self-conscious, aware of her state of undress and uncertain how she must look. The woman, although she had no memory, she could guess she was 18 or so by the shape of her body and the smoothness of her face, wrapped her arms around herself. Goosebumps rose on her arms, a mixture of the forest's cool air and her own anxiousness. As she moved closer to the sound of water, it grew louder. Eventually, she found a narrow stream. The water was crystal clear and trickled over smooth pebbles. She sank to her knees at the bank, scooping up handfuls of water to drink. Its coolness was a blessing. She drank until she felt momentarily satisfied, then sat back on her heels. The beating in her head softened a bit as the water gave her some relief. The sun had risen higher, illuminating the forest floor more fully, and now she could see the reflection in the stream's surface. There, she glimpsed herself, a young woman with light brown skin, wide dark eyes, and full lips. Her hair was thick and black, tumbling past her shoulders. Even streaked with dirt, leaves, and tangles, she could see a striking sort of beauty. But the reflection was also a stranger, someone she did not remember at all. She sighed, dipping her hands into the stream again to wash her face. The cool water felt refreshing, but it did nothing to jog her memory. For a moment, she closed her eyes, hoping some vision of her past would appear. Her mind, however, was blank except for a faint echo of fear. The fear that she had lost something important. She turned around, settling on a patch of grass and leaning against a mossy rock. It struck her that the forest was quiet but not silent. The air was alive with the hum of insects, the distant screech of birds, and the soft brush of wind among leaves. It was as though the forest was welcoming her into its hidden rhythms. She stared at her hands, noticing calluses on her palms. She wondered how they got there. Had she done manual labor? Had she worked in a field, or was she used to some sort of craft? No answer came to her. All she knew was that she felt out of place and yet, strangely, not terrified. There was a calm acceptance in her that she couldn't explain. She was alone, with no memory of the life she left behind, and yet the forest seemed to beckon her gently, encouraging her not to panic. Still, she knew she needed food. She also needed shelter, or clothing, or some way to protect herself from the elements when night came. Suddenly, the rustling of bushes to her left caught her attention. She froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Was it a dangerous animal? The forest must be home to many creatures. She heard a soft chittering noise. Something darted into sight, a small monkey with wide, curious eyes. It perched on a branch, watching her. For a moment, they simply observed one another, the monkey tilting its head from side to side as though trying to make sense of this newcomer, and the woman kneeling by the stream, staring back in silent wonder. She raised a hand slowly, not wanting to startle the creature. The monkey twitched, then scurried off into the thick foliage. She was alone again, but the encounter was strangely comforting. It was a sign of life, of normalcy in this overwhelming situation. She pulled herself up and took stock of her immediate needs. Her stomach rumbled again, reminding her that she needed sustenance. The forest provided water, but she would need to find fruits, nuts, or something edible. Perhaps she could find a path, or a sign of human civilization. Surely, she couldn't be the only person for miles. But there was no visible trail, no footprints, and no sign of a road or a village. Just an endless sea of green in every direction. Cautiously, she wove her way deeper into the forest, hands lightly brushing aside branches and vines. The smells were strong, earthy, humid, and richly layered with the scent of wet leaves and distant blooms. She paused occasionally at trees bearing small fruit. With uncertain fingers, she tested some that looked vaguely familiar, bright yellow orbs with soft rinds. She picked one and sniffed it. The memory of taste was absent, but hunger prodded her to try. Cautiously, she took a tiny bite. Sweetness flooded her mouth, and she nearly gasped in relief, chewing the morsel eagerly. She realized how lucky she was that this particular fruit was safe to eat. She filled her stomach, drinking periodically from the stream, as she continued to search for any sign of a person or a settlement. Time passed in a haze of rustling leaves and the warm sun overhead. Eventually, her legs grew tired. She found a clearing where the undergrowth was less thick, near the base of a large baobab tree with a wide trunk and deep shadows. There, she decided to rest. The throbbing in her head was still present, less urgent than before, but it thumped like a dull drumbeat behind her temples. She lay against the tree's trunk, her eyes half closed, letting her mind drift. In that half-sleeping state, images flickered through her head, fragments of color, voices that faded before she could understand them, and a silhouette of a face she couldn't quite place. When she opened her eyes, the sun was dipping lower. The forest had taken on a softer, more golden hue as afternoon shifted toward evening. The knowledge that darkness would soon cover the land sent a surge of urgency through her. She needed a safe place to spend the night. She had no supplies, no bedding, no clear plan. She rose, wincing at the stiffness in her legs. A deeper exploration of the surrounding area was her best bet. A few steps into her search, however, the sky rumbled ominously. Clouds, tinted with purple and gray, began drifting across the sun. The wind picked up. She could smell moisture in the air, and the shift of temperature told her rain was coming. Panicking, she scanned for shelter, some hollow in a tree or a place where thick foliage might shield her from the worst of the downpour. She jogged in what felt like a random direction, weaving around thick trunks, stepping over fallen branches. The earth started to moisten, the first drops pattering against leaves above her. The sound of thunder boomed again. At last, she found a small outcropping of rock. It was at the edge of a slope, half hidden by a curtain of vines. There was just enough space beneath it that she could crouch and avoid the worst of the rainfall. She ducked inside as the storm broke. Sheets of rain drenched the forest in seconds, the air growing cool and smelling sharply of fresh earth. She peered out from her refuge, hugging her knees to her chest. As lightning flashed across the sky, she felt her heart pounding with both fear and a wild sense of awe. From beneath her rocky shelter, the storm was simultaneously frightening and mesmerizing. The trees swayed violently, and the wind howled, but the forest welcomed the rain's nourishment. Her mind drifted back to her predicament. Was there someone out there searching for her right now? Did she have a family, parents, siblings, who wondered where she was? She squeezed her eyes shut, trying desperately to bring forth any recollection of her past. The only result was a dull ache in her chest. It was as if her memories were locked behind a heavy door that she couldn't pry open. The rain fell for what felt like hours, though it was probably no more than half an hour. When it finally slowed to a drizzle, the afternoon was slipping toward twilight, and the air around her was filled with droplets glistening on every leaf and vine. She crawled out of her hiding spot, brushing mud and pebbles off her dress. She paused, glancing around to make sure it was safe. Nothing stirred except the occasional hiss of wind through wet branches. Darkness was descending rapidly. With night would come new dangers, predators, insects, and the uncertain terror of not knowing her surroundings. But she refused to just give up. She focused on steadying her breath. Recalling the large baobab tree she had seen earlier, she thought it might offer some shelter under its roots or in a hollow. The bark on a baobab is thick, and sometimes, the interior can be partially hollowed by time or animals. If she could return there, she might have at least some protection from the elements. She made her way back the way she had come, using her memory of the large trunk as a guide. The forest had darkened. Strange, nocturnal calls echoed among the trees. She heard the hoot of an owl overhead. Her bare feet sank into mud, leaves clinging to her ankles. It took effort to remain calm, but something in her core reminded her she had no choice. Panic would accomplish nothing. At long last, she spotted the distinct silhouette of the baobab's thick trunk, looming in the gloom. She hurried forward. Another flash of lightning lit up the clouds overhead, followed by a faint rumble of thunder. She circled the tree, searching for any gap or opening. Rainwater dripped from its branches, wetting her hair and shoulders. Then she found it, a hollowed space in the trunk. It was narrow, more like a fissure than a cave, but she might be able to squeeze inside. She tested it cautiously. The opening was jagged, and a cluster of old spiderwebs clung to the edges, but beyond that, there was a small compartment. With a final surge of courage, she slipped through, hugging her arms close to her sides so she wouldn't scrape against the inner bark too much. Inside, it was dark, nearly pitch black. She used her hands to feel around. There was enough room to sit upright and even shift her legs a bit. The air smelled earthy and slightly damp, but it was better than facing the storm unprotected. She settled herself, trying to calm her racing heart. Above her, she could hear the faint dripping of raindrops seeping through the tree's bark. She must have drifted into a restless doze, for a while later, she was startled awake by a dream or a memory, she wasn't sure which. In the flicker of a dream, she had seen a large house with red clay walls, a courtyard filled with bright flowers, and a laughing figure reaching out to take her hand. In the dream, there was warmth and happiness. But when she jerked awake, the images vanished, leaving her with only the echo of that laughter in her mind. She placed a hand on her chest, feeling her heart thunder. Could that have been her home? Or was it just a trick of her mind? Frustration welled up in her. She wanted to remember. She yearned for something, anything, that would assure her she had an identity, that she was not simply a nameless wanderer. But her memory was stubbornly blank, offering only vague silhouettes and sounds that vanished the moment she tried to focus on them. Her exhaustion eventually overcame her anxiety, and she slipped into another uneasy sleep. When she next woke, the forest outside was still cloaked in darkness, but she sensed that dawn was not far off. She heard insects chirping, an occasional croak of a frog, the gentle sigh of the breeze in the upper branches. She felt safer in the shelter of the baobab's hollow, though not entirely at ease. She thought about the day she had just survived, waking up in the forest with no memory, finding water and fruit, sheltering from the rain. She could hardly believe she had managed it. Yet she was still alive, and the primal fear in her chest had at least loosened its hold. There was a certain resilience building inside her, as though the forest itself was lending her strength. Soon, the horizon began to lighten. She carefully crawled out of the tree trunk, emerging into the dawn. A gentle mist clung to the undergrowth, and droplets of rain sparkled like tiny gems in the pale early light. She stretched her stiff limbs, feeling a twinge in her back from sleeping in such cramped quarters. The morning chorus of birds began, each one singing a different tune. She glanced down at her ragged dress. It was still damp, clinging uncomfortably to her body. Self-consciously, she brushed off bits of bark and spiderweb that had stuck to the fabric. She could see now, in clearer light, just how dirty and disheveled she looked. But there was nothing to be done for that at the moment. Survival was a higher priority than appearances. Her stomach growled again. She resolved to find more fruit or perhaps some nuts if they were available. She headed off in the direction of the stream, guided by the memory of trickling water and the sense of which way was downhill. She was beginning to recognize small landmarks, a twisted tree with dangling vines, a cluster of bright yellow mushrooms at the base of a stump. Gradually, a strange sense of familiarity was seeping into her experience of the forest. It struck her that she did not even have a name to call herself. She wondered if her name might be hidden somewhere in her mind, waiting to be rediscovered. But it remained elusive. Perhaps, she thought, if she found other people, they might recognize her. Maybe someone was looking for her. She paused, hearing a rustling sound a few paces ahead. Her heart leapt. She wasn't sure if she was about to run into a wild animal or a human. Carefully, she tiptoed closer, parting the leafy bushes. There, on a low branch overhanging the water, a small group of monkeys was gathered, grooming each other and lazily chattering in the morning sun. The same curious monkey from yesterday might have been among them, it was impossible to tell, but the sight made her smile. The simple companionship these creatures shared warmed her. She envied them, their security within the forest's embrace and their sense of belonging. When the monkey spotted her, one gave a startled chirp, and the group scampered up into the higher branches. She watched them go, then knelt by the water to drink and wash her face. The reflection that greeted her was still that of a beautiful, light brown-skinned young woman with dirt on her cheeks and fear in her eyes. She inhaled a trembling breath, splashing water on her arms and neck, as if she could wash away not just the grime but the confusion within her. However, no amount of washing could restore her lost past. She pressed her palms against her face, feeling tears threaten. But she refused to let them fall. She had survived the night. She had to keep pushing forward. She found more of the sweet fruit she had eaten the day before. After finishing her makeshift breakfast, she resolved to explore methodically. Simply wandering aimlessly could lead her in circles. She needed to pick a direction and walk until she found something, a path, footprints, or any sign of civilization. The forest had its own mysteries, and staying put would accomplish nothing. She set off, choosing to follow the stream downstream. In many places, rivers or streams lead to villages, farms, or at least larger water sources. That plan seemed logical enough, and having a fixed direction boosted her confidence. The hours passed in a blur of tangled undergrowth, towering trees, and the constant lullaby of rushing water. She kept going, ignoring the complaints of her tired feet. Her sandals, she realized she wasn't even wearing any. Oddly enough, though, while her soles were sore, they weren't shredded as one might expect. A part of her mind wondered if she had once been used to walking barefoot. Occasionally, she would pause to rest, nibble on fruit, and sip from the stream. With each step, the forest seemed to open its secrets a little wider. She saw birds with shimmering feathers that hopped from branch to branch, calling out in shrill, melodic cries. She noticed the ferns and creepers that draped themselves over fallen logs, forming natural archways. There was beauty here beyond anything she could have imagined, although, without her memory, it was difficult to be sure what she might have seen before. At last, as the sun set high in the sky, she came to a broader area where the stream widened, forming a small pool. Rocks jutted up in places, creating a gentle, musical cascade. The place had a magical quality, peaceful and serene. She stepped closer, scanning her surroundings for any clue that humans might visit the spot. Then she froze. Propped against a tree trunk near the water's edge was something startlingly out of place, a single sandal, battered and worn with age. She stared at it, her heart thudding. It might have been abandoned. Or it might mean someone had been here not long ago. She crouched beside it, picking it up gingerly. It was made of leather, stitched with thin straps, the sole scuffed from many walks. Her mind reeled, wondering if the sandal belonged to her or to a stranger. She looked around for more evidence, a footprint, a broken branch, or another item. She found nothing except a smooth depression in the mud that could have been a footprint, though it was too distorted by the damp earth to be certain. She clutched the sandal, breath coming fast. This was proof she was not alone in this forest. Someone else, at some point, had passed this way. Her chest flooded with both hope and anxiety. If there were people here, they might help her, tell her who she was, or at least take her to safety. But she also felt an unexplainable stirring of fear. What if the people here were not friendly? What if they had something to do with her memory loss? She spent another hour circling the clearing, poking around in the hope of finding more clues. Eventually, she realized she was only wasting energy. The sandal was the only item. She decided to continue following the water, but this time her senses were on high alert, scanning every shadow and movement in the leaves. The forest didn't yield any more direct signs of human life, but she pressed on, determination fueling her steps. As late afternoon slanted the sun's rays and turned the leaves gold, she came upon a place where the stream branched into two. One fork meandered through thick foliage, disappearing quickly from view. The other fork tumbled into a rocky ravine. She paused. Which way should she go? Before she could decide, a strange fluttering sensation raced through her mind. A headache flared, and she found herself swaying as a vision pricked at her memory. She saw a flash of red cloth, a woman's voice crying out, or was it her own voice? She clutched her head, the pain fierce, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Then the vision was gone, leaving only confusion and renewed terror. She dropped to her knees in the wet grass, one hand supporting her trembling body. What was happening to her? The forest offered no answer. In the muted hush of the trees, she felt tears burn at the corners of her eyes. But again, she refused to cry, bearing the sorrow and pressing her lips together. She would not break, not until she had answers. Evening lights stretched through the treetops. She found a reasonably dry clearing where two large rocks formed a nook, offering partial shelter. Gathering armfuls of big leaves, she lined the ground, forming a rough bedding. She settled onto the leaves, leaning against the stone. Her mind buzzed with questions, yet exhaustion pulled at her limbs. As dusk deepened, the forest came alive with unfamiliar sounds. Creatures howled in the distance, insects sang shrilly, and leaves rustled at the slightest breeze. She sat there in the gloom, hands clasped around her knees, thinking about the day and the mysterious sandal. At length, she whispered into the darkness, though she didn't know to whom or what she spoke. "Who am I?" Her voice, soft and trembling, was carried away by the wind. She half expected an answer from the shadows, but none came. Finally, she lay down, turning onto her side. Sleep stole over her in increments, her body too drained to resist, her mind too burdened to stay alert. That night she dreamed again. Flickers of color danced behind her closed eyelids, a swirl of vibrant orange cloth, a roar of voices in excitement, and then a sudden jolt of terror. She seemed to be running, or someone was calling out to her. The morning sun found her huddled under the stone outcrop. She woke slowly, her limbs stiff and her eyes dry from fitful rest. Once again, she carried the silent question in her chest: who was she, and how had she come here? This question seemed to beat in time with her heart. She rose, leaving her makeshift bedding behind. She resolved to continue downstream once more, determined that she would keep walking until she found a village, a path, or any human contact. The memory of that single, abandoned sandal was enough to spur her onward. Unbeknownst to her, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath, as though guarding secrets from her watchful gaze. She had no idea that her arrival here was no accident. Nor did she know that her search for the truth would soon draw her deeper into the hidden powers and ancient stories of this land. For now, she was only aware of the thrum of her own pulse, the hunger in her belly, and the unwavering desire to find an answer in a world that had left her memory as barren as a dry well. Perhaps tomorrow she would learn something new. Perhaps tomorrow, a piece of her past would return. But for today, she wandered onward, a nameless, beautiful, light brown-skinned woman whose only companion was the whisper of leaves and the gentle current of the forest stream. Dawn broke across the forest canopy, painting the treetops in shades of pale orange and soft pink. The young woman stirred from her makeshift bed of leaves, blinking in the early light. She stretched her aching limbs, her muscles stiff from another night of sleeping on the ground. For a long moment, she simply sat there, listening to the forest's morning chorus, birds calling in high, lilting notes, insects buzzing their dawn greeting, and the rustle of unseen creatures moving across the damp undergrowth. She still had no memory of her name or her past. And yet, as she leaned against a lichen-covered stone, she felt a growing familiarity with this wild place. The air smelled of wet earth and fragrant blooms, the leaves glistened with dew. Bit by bit, she was beginning to understand the rhythms here. She knew where to find the sweet fruits he had been subsisting on, recognized the best spots along the stream to drink or bathe, and could pick out certain wildlife calls that signified danger or mere curiosity. Anyone stumbling upon her at that moment would have seen a striking figure, a lithe young woman of about 18, her light brown skin glowing softly in the early light, her dark hair tumbling down her back in loose, tangled waves. Though her torn dress was muddied and worn, there was something undeniably sensual in her posture, an innate grace that shone through despite her exhaustion. She radiated a certain resilience that belied her lack of memories and her precarious situation. Yet beneath this outward composure, her mind raced with questions. She recalled the lonely sandal she had discovered the previous day near the pool. That single item of footwear, tattered, scuffed by countless steps, had ignited a spark of hope and dread in equal measure. There had to be other people in these woods. But if there were people, why hadn't she encountered them yet? And what if meeting them would bring more harm than good? She swallowed these anxieties and stood, resolved to keep following the stream. It was her best guide for finding civilization, however distant. Slinging a satchel of large leaves filled with fruit over her shoulder, an impromptu bundle she had fashioned to carry her meager rations, she set off, her bare feet brushing across the damp earth. The forest gradually shifted as she traveled. The mahogany and iroko trees gave way to clusters of bamboo thickets, their tall, hollow stalks swaying in the breeze with a soft, clattering sound. She pushed through the dense vegetation, careful not to slip on the slick, mossy ground. The stream, ever her companion, gurgled nearby, winding around smooth stones and weaving between thick roots. Overhead, the sun grew brighter, filtering through the bamboo leaves in narrow beams that danced along her path. More than once, she paused, certain she had heard a voice or footsteps nearby. But each time, she found only the subdued movements of forest creatures, a startled bird taking flight, a family of monkeys rustling in the treetops, or a small antelope darting through the shadows. She felt like a ghost, moving through a world that seemed almost indifferent to her presence. The hours wore on, and she took breaks to rest and eat. Anxiety gnawed at her each time she thought about nightfall. Living in the forest, with no companion or protector, was a precarious existence. She had managed so far, but she had no idea how long she could keep it up. And still her mind churned with the same unanswered question, who am I? By midday, she realized that the bamboo thicket was beginning to thin out. The sound of the stream grew louder, as though it were cascading over rocks or perhaps spilling into a larger body of water. Eager for a clue, she quickened her pace. Soon, she broke through the last clump of bamboo and found herself at the edge of a clearing. She gasped softly. Before her lay a wide river, its surface shimmering under the midday sun. The forest's gentle stream poured into this river, creating a small waterfall that cascaded down smooth stones. On the opposite shore, the land rose in gentle hills, dotted with tall grass and scattered trees. The river's width was intimidating, its current swirling in restless patterns. She stood there, uncertain how to proceed, yet relieved at the sight of a landmark that felt significant. That's when she noticed something else, footprints in the soft mud near the water's edge. These were more distinct than the vague impression she had seen before, clearly human footprints, left behind not long ago. Her pulse quickened. She crouched down, pressing her fingertips against them as though she might glean some knowledge by touch alone. Someone was here, she whispered. The words felt foreign on her tongue, but her heart soared with a tenuous hope. She glanced around, trying to see if there was any sign of these people. The footprints vanished near the water, as if whoever made them had waded into the river or perhaps boarded a small boat. But there was no canoe or raft in sight. She rose and scanned her surroundings for any other clues. On a nearby tree, a piece of cloth hung from a jagged piece of bark, a torn strip of red fabric that fluttered gently in the breeze. The sight of that vibrant red made her breath catch in her throat. It tugged at something deep in her memory, reminding her of a fleeting image from her dreams, swirling orange or red cloth, a crowd of voices. She reached out and carefully retrieved the scrap of fabric. It felt worn, and yet its color remained vivid. A wave of dizziness passed over her. She closed her eyes, and in her mind's eye, she glimpsed the courtyard from her dream, a place with red clay walls, a bright cloth draped over a railing, and people's laughter echoing in the background. The vision was gone as quickly as it came, leaving her with a tangle of confusion and yearning. She tucked the cloth into her makeshift bundle, determined to keep it with her. Whether it was a piece of her past or simply a random scrap, it was the first real item, besides the sandal, that might tie her to someone else. The afternoon sun bore down as she walked along the riverbank, searching for a spot where she might cross. The current looked strong, and she didn't trust her swimming abilities in such deep waters. The memory of how to swim seemed distant, uncertain. Occasionally, she ventured a few steps into the river, feeling the pull of the current tug at her ankles, but always she retreated to the safety of the shore. As she continued downstream, the forest receded, replaced by rolling grasslands. Tall, golden blades waved in the breeze, brushing against her thighs. The ground felt different here, less spongy with moisture, and small stones peppered the soil. She noticed more signs of animal life, cloven hoof prints in the mud, likely from antelopes or waterbucks, and the distant calls of birds hidden in the grass. Her thirst drove her to pause once more at the water's edge. Kneeling, she scooped water into her cupped hands. As she drank, a movement caught her eye further down the bank, a figure, partially obscured by the tall grasses. Her heart jolted with excitement and sudden fear. Her first instinct was to hide, to slip behind the nearest cluster of reeds and watch from a distance. Through the rippling heat haze, she could make out a silhouette, someone walking along the shore with a staff in hand, dressed in a simple wrap. The figure was slender, but the face was too distant to discern. She crouched lower, biting her lip. This was it, another human being. All her earlier yearning to find people clashed with a new surge of caution. What if they are dangerous? She thought. What if they caused my memory loss? But the alternative, that she might remain alone indefinitely, seemed far worse. Summoning her courage, she emerged from the reeds and took a tentative step forward. "Hello," she called, voice trembling. The figure stopped abruptly, spinning to face her. She lifted her hand in a gesture of peace, palm open. "Please, can you help me?" For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the figure strode forward with a cautious grace. As the distance closed, she saw that it was a young man, perhaps a few years older than she was. His skin was a warm brown, and he wore a simple tunic-like garment made from rough-woven cloth. His feet were bare, dusty from walking. He paused several yards away, gripping his staff. She noticed he held it at the ready, as though prepared to defend himself. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice wary but not hostile. He spoke in a language that resonated oddly in her ears. To her relief, she understood him, somehow. The words made sense, though she wasn't entirely sure how she knew this language in the first place. She hesitated, her voice faltering. "I don't know." She swallowed, feeling the weight of her confusion and vulnerability. "I woke up in the forest. I can't remember anything." His expression softened slightly, though his grip on the staff did not. "You are alone?" She nodded. "I've been wandering for days. Maybe longer. I found a sandal. I found this piece of cloth." She held up the red scrap, unsure why she felt compelled to show him. In an instant, his eyes widened. Before she could react, he rushed forward and grabbed her wrist, staring at the cloth. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, voice tight with urgency. Alarmed by his sudden movement, she yelped, struggling to pull away. His grip loosened as he realized he was frightening her. He took a step back, breathing heavily. "My apologies," he murmured. "I did not mean to startle you. It's just that cloth bears the mark of my people's weaving." "Where did you find it?" She caught her breath. "By the river, near where the forest ends. It was snagged on a tree." He searched her face, as if trying to judge whether she spoke truthfully. "That pattern belongs to the cloth made by the Ndi clan. They live upriver from here." His voice was laced with concern. "If you found this cloth torn, it might mean there has been trouble." She swallowed, her pulse still racing from his abrupt approach. "Are they your family?" He shook his head. "Not exactly. But they are my people." He paused, glancing at the staff in his hand, then back to her. My name is Gamba. I am traveling to my home village. We had heard rumors of fighting along the northern boundary. Some say the Ndik have been driven from their land. Others say they fight back fiercely. A flicker of something like recognition stirred within her, but it vanished before she could seize it. I don't remember anything about that, she whispered. I'm just lost. Gamba's eyes, dark and steady, took in her torn dress, her bare feet, and the exhaustion etched into her posture. Your accent, it sounds like you might be from near the Ndik lands, he said slowly. Or perhaps from one of the border villages. But you truly remember nothing? She shook her head, feeling tears threaten. Nothing but fragments. Dreams. A silence stretched between them, filled by the river's gentle rush. At last, Gamba spoke again. If you come with me, I can at least take you somewhere safe. My people are skilled at healing. Perhaps one of our wise women can help you recover your memories. Relief coursed through her, followed quickly by uncertainty. She had yearned to find another human being, someone who could guide her. But a small voice inside her warned that she still knew nothing about these lands or about Gamba's true intentions. Yet her exhaustion and desperation won out. She needed help. She nodded. Gamba reached into a small pouch tied at his waist and offered her a strip of dried meat. Though she was wary of unfamiliar foods, hunger overrode caution, she took the piece and chewed it slowly, grateful for the protein after days of surviving on fruits. It tasted salty and faintly spicy. Thank you, she managed between bites. He nodded, his expression still guarded. We'll go further downstream, he said, gesturing for her to follow him along the riverbank. My village, Azawi, is not far. Perhaps half a day's walk if we keep a good pace. We'll need to watch for hyenas and other predators in the grasslands. Stay close. The mention of predators sent a chill through her. So far, she had managed to avoid any real danger, but the thought of facing large, cunning creatures made her realize just how vulnerable she truly was. She stepped nearer to Gamba, and together they set off. The hours blurred as they walked. Gamba proved to be a competent guide, pointing out where the ground might be boggy, warning her away from patches of tall grass where snakes could lurk, and calling her to pause when he spotted a family of warthogs scampering by. Despite his stern demeanor, he occasionally shared bits of information about the region, the names of certain trees, the grazing habits of local antelopes, and fragments of folklore about the spirits said to dwell in the water or the earth. She absorbed these details hungrily, hoping something might stir her memory. At times, she'd ask him, does the name of this tree sound familiar? Did I used to live near them? But he would only shake his head and confess he couldn't say for sure. By late afternoon, the horizon opened up, revealing a scattering of small huts in the distance, circular structures with thatched roofs, surrounded by gardens of cassava and maize. Azawi, Gamba said, pointing. Relief washed over her at the sight of human habitation. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires, and she could make out the faint shapes of people moving between the huts. Yet as they drew closer, she noticed an odd tension in the village. A group of villagers stood gathered outside one of the huts, their voices low and urgent. She could sense the apprehension in the air. When they saw Gamba and the woman approach, a few children darted behind their mothers' skirts, peering out with wide, curious eyes. Men bearing spears or bows lowered their weapons slightly, but they did not fully relax. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward. He wore a necklace of carved wooden beads and had an air of authority about him. Gamba, he greeted, glancing uneasily at the young woman. We feared the worst when you did not return sooner. Gamba inclined his head respectfully. Chief Ebony, my journey was longer than expected. I found this woman alone in the wilderness. She has no memory of who she is or where she comes from. Murmurs rippled through the gathered villagers. Chief Ebony's gaze swept over her, taking in her ragged appearance. Despite his stern expression, there was a hint of compassion in his eyes. "Welcome to Azawi," he said, though his tone was cautious. "We will not turn you away. Especially in these troubled times." She opened her mouth to speak, but found her throat dry. She managed to whisper, "Thank you." Chief Ebony turned back to Gamba. "Tell me, have you brought news? We have heard rumors of raids near the Ndeek border. Our scouts claim to have seen refugees fleeing south." Gamba's jaw tightened. "I found a piece of Ndeek cloth by the river. Torn and abandoned. I fear they may have been attacked." Another ripple of concern spread through the crowd. The woman felt the eyes of the villagers flick to her, some of them lingering on the red scrap of cloth tucked at her waist. She sensed their unease. "Am I a refugee too?" she wondered. The possibility weighed on her heart. A young woman emerged from behind the chief, her bright eyes watching with keen interest. She wore a simple wrap around her torso and a woven skirt from waist to knee. Her hair was braided close to her scalp, and she carried a small earthenware bowl. "Father," she said, directing a meaningful look at the chief, "our guest needs rest and food. The wise woman is tending to Toma's wounds, perhaps she can see her next." Ebony hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Zoe. Take her to the elder's hut." "But Gamba," he turned to the young man. "We must speak. Our scouts returned with troubling news." Gamba inclined his head again. "Of course, Chief." Feeling suddenly exposed, the woman watched Gamba follow the chief and a group of men toward another hut. Zoe stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on her elbow. "Come with me," she said softly. "You look exhausted." Despite her apprehension, the woman allowed herself to be led through the village. She tried not to flinch at the curious, suspicious stares of the villagers. A few whispered among themselves, perhaps wondering if she was a spy or a victim of the raids. Yet no one confronted her. If anything, she sensed pity. She offered them a small, uncertain smile, and a few of the villagers hesitantly returned it. Zay guided her to a large hut near the center of the village. Thick smoke drifted from a hole in the roof, and the scent of medicinal herbs hung in the air. Inside, the interior was dim, lit by the glow of a small fire. A wrinkled old woman sat on a low stool, grinding leaves into a paste with a mortar and pestle. 3 younger women assisted her, fetching herbs from baskets or stirring a pot over the flames. The old woman looked up at the newcomers, her eyes sharp despite her advanced years. "Lay her down," she said in a raspy voice, gesturing to a straw mat near the wall. Zoe helped the woman ease onto the mat. In the corner, a young boy lay curled under a thin blanket, his face creased with pain. She realized with a twinge of sympathy that this hut served as a rudimentary clinic. The old woman shuffled over, tapping a gnarled wooden cane against the ground. She peered at the stranger's face, muttering under her breath. No memory, yes." Her cataract-clouded eyes seemed to look right through the young woman. "Yes," the woman managed to say. Her head throbbed, still. My mind is blank." The elder made a soft clicking sound with her tongue. "Then we must call upon the spirit of memory." She turned to one of her assistants. "Fetch the leaves of amandi, the bark of Congo tree, and a pot of clean water. Hurry." While the assistant hurried to gather the materials, the elder turned her attention back to the young woman. She gently placed a hand on the woman's forehead, then drew it down to her chest. The gesture felt both caring and analytical, as though the elder were reading her energy. "You have a strong heart," the old woman murmured. "But your spirit is troubled." There is a shadow around you, child. I can feel it. A knot formed in the woman's throat. I want to remember, she said, forcing the words out. Is it possible? The elder's gaze flickered with an emotion that might have been sorrow. Memory is a tricky thing. Sometimes it protects us by hiding truths until we are ready to face them. She looked at Azawi, who stood nearby with concern etched on her features. But we shall do what we can. The mixture I prepare may help unlock her mind, or at least ease the pain that grips her head. The assistant returned with the requested ingredients, a handful of spiky green leaves, strips of fragrant bark, and a clay pot of water. With careful, deliberate movements, the elder added each piece to a smaller pot placed over the fire. A pungent aroma soon filled the air, making the woman's eyes water. Azawi knelt beside her, offering a reassuring smile. Our wise woman is gifted. If anyone can help you, it is her. Grateful for the kindness, the woman closed her eyes, the swirl of herbs and smoke enveloping her senses. She felt a gentle hand lift her head, pressing a bowl to her lips. The liquid was warm, bitter, and slightly sweet. She grimaced but forced herself to swallow. Almost immediately, she felt a tingling sensation spread through her limbs, as though tiny sparks danced under her skin. The hut's interior seemed to waver. Shapes blurred. She heard the fire crackle, the old woman chanting in a low voice, and the hiss of the brew as it simmered. Then came darkness. In that darkness, she dreamed. Colors swirled across her vision, deep reds and oranges, the shades of flickering firelight. She saw silhouettes dancing around a blazing fire, heard the sound of drums pounding a steady rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Laughter mingled with chanting. Then a face appeared, a woman's face, beautiful and regal, wearing elaborate beads in her hair. Her expression was urgent, her eyes pleading. Run, the woman seemed to say, though no sound emerged. Suddenly, the vision shifted. The same face contorted in fear, and a cacophony of shouts rang out. There was a flash of steel, a sword, a spear, and the terrible sound of screams. The world spun violently. She glimpsed the bright red cloth, stained with something dark, fluttering in the wind. Then blackness. She felt as though she were falling, her body twisting through an endless void. A final image broke through the darkness, the same courtyard she had seen in earlier dreams, the clay walls bright in the sun. She stood in the middle of that courtyard, wearing a flowing dress that shimmered with red and gold patterns. A group of women surrounded her, each wearing similar attire, singing a lullaby-like chant. A name hovered just on the edge of her consciousness. Then it was gone. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The interior of the hut came back into focus, fire still glowed in the center, though it had burned low. The old woman was at her side, a hand resting gently on her shoulder. Azawi, too, watched with wide, anxious eyes. Did you see anything? The elder asked quietly. Shaking, she tried to form words. There was a courtyard, and dancing. There was, someone told me to run. Tears tracked down her cheeks, unbidden. And then, screaming. I heard screaming. Zoe's grip on her hand tightened. It's okay, she whispered. You're safe now. The old woman looked pensive. These are pieces of your past, child. They swirl together like leaves in a storm. We cannot force them to fit just yet. But do not lose hope. She was too overwhelmed to reply. The elder stood, beckoning Zoe to follow, and they moved a short distance away to speak in hushed tones. The woman on the mat tried to slow her breathing, forcing away the lingering terror from her visions. A single question looped through her mind: who told me to run? And why? The next few days in Azawi passed in a haze. Word spread quickly about the nameless stranger who had arrived with Gamba. Some villagers eyed her with suspicion, while others offered timid kindness, a bowl of porridge, a threadbare cloth to replace her torn dress. She tried to return these gestures with grateful smiles and polite words. At night, she slept in a small hut the villagers reserved for travelers. It was a simple space, a straw mat on the floor, a clay lamp. Yet compared to her nights in the forest, it felt luxurious. Each day, the wise woman, who the villagers called Grandmother Aba, had her drink the herbal concoction meant to stir her memories. Each day, she drifted into a half-dream state, catching only fleeting, disjointed images, a man placing a necklace around her neck, a swirl of red dust under dancing feet, a swirl of pain and panic. Each time she awakened, a fresh wave of frustration battered her. The memories seemed so close yet remained maddeningly elusive. In the village's open marketplace, a dusty clearing where several small stalls were set up, she began to pick up snippets of conversation. People whispered about raids to the north, about tensions between clans, about an ominous group of warriors rumored to be taking advantage of the unrest. Gamba sometimes walked with her, pointing out the different huts and introducing her to villagers who might share news. He rarely spoke of his own journey, nor did he press her further about her past. Yet she sensed he was troubled by the mounting rumors. One afternoon, as she helped a group of women shell beans by the cooking fire, a flurry of alarmed shouts arose from the far side of the village. She exchanged a worried glance with the other woman, then followed them as they rushed to see what was happening. Near the edge of the maize fields, a scout stood, panting, his tunic torn and his eyes wild with alarm. "They're coming," he gasped. "I saw them, along the river, heavily armed. They wear black tunics and carry spears with strange markings." Fear rippled through the crowd. Chief Ebony appeared, flanked by 2 men with bows. "How many?" he demanded. "Maybe 10 or 15, the scout replied. "I couldn't stay long to count. But they looked fierce." A hush fell over the villagers, many of them turning their gaze to the stranger in their midst. She felt the weight of their suspicion and dread. If these raiders, or whoever they were, reached the village, what would become of her? Would they see her as an enemy, or as some pawn in a conflict she didn't understand? Chief Ebony gestured for everyone to gather. "All who can fight, arm yourselves. Protect the elderly and the children. We will not be caught unaware." A shaky breath escaped her. Even if she wanted to help, she had no idea how to wield a weapon. She felt powerless. Zoe pulled her aside, her voice trembling with determination. "We'll keep the children safe in the meeting hut. Stay with us." The woman nodded, though her heart pounded. She remembered her dream, flashes of violence and terror. The swirling memory of someone telling her to run, of a spear glinting in the sun. She was suddenly certain that what was happening here was tied, in some way, to her lost past. As the villagers scrambled to prepare, she hurried with Zoe toward the largest hut in Azawi, where already mothers and children were gathering. Fear laced the air, making it thick and tense. She held a small child's hand, trying to project calm she did not feel. In the back of her mind, a single thought emerged: if these raiders are connected to what happened to me, then maybe this is my chance to learn the truth. But that truth seemed as dangerous as it was elusive. The sun was dipping low over the grasslands, painting the horizon in fiery streaks of orange and red. Inside Azawi's largest communal hut, tension thickened the air. Women held their children close, the elderly whispered fervent prayers. In the corner, the young woman, still nameless, sat with Zoe, her heart pounding a steady drumbeat in her ears. They could hear the commotion outside as the able-bodied men and women of the village armed themselves with spears, bows, and whatever tools they could wield for defense. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the swirl of fragmented visions she'd experienced over the last few days. For a moment, she could almost hear drumbeats from another time, another place, her memory a mosaic of flickering images and sounds. A face, pleading. A flash of steel. A swirl of red cloth. A single, resonant command that remained silent on her lips. Zoe placed a hand on her shoulder. "They'll protect us," the girl murmured, her brave tone belied by the tremor in her voice. "Azawi has stood firm against trouble before." The woman managed a shaky nod. She recalled the scouts' warning about a group of unknown raiders wearing black tunics. If they were indeed behind the attacks on the Ndik people or others along the border, she feared this confrontation might be bloody. Deep in her gut, an unexplained certainty told her these raiders were linked to what had happened to her. Outside, the sounds of raised voices and hurried steps began to swell. The communal hut's entrance flapped open, and Gamba burst in, breathing heavily. His eyes roved over the gathered group, pausing on the woman. "They're close," he said, voice tight with urgency. "Chief Ebony wants all non-combatants to remain here. We've prepared defenses along the outer fields." He nodded toward the woman. "Stay with Zoe. No matter what happens, do not rush outside." She swallowed hard, her chest tight with a mixture of worry and a growing sense of inevitability. Yes, she agreed. She could feel the question burning on her tongue, what if there's something I can do? Yet she held it back. She didn't want to jeopardize the trust Gamba and the others had shown her. Besides, she had no weapon, no skills, only the scraps of her fractured memory and a budding conviction that the raiders might hold the key to unlocking who she really was. Gamba left as swiftly as he had come. Zoe squeezed the woman's hand. "We must trust them," she said, trying to soothe the trembling children who clung to her skirt. The woman nodded, inhaling deeply. Trust. The word felt heavy with unspoken meaning. Somehow, in the middle of her confusion, she had found a measure of safety among these strangers. She owed them her gratitude, yet she also worried that her presence might bring them harm. Night fell, and with it came the first sounds of approaching conflict. From beyond the hut's woven walls, the clash of spear against spear and the ring of metal filled the air. The low hiss of arrows whizzed by, followed by startled cries. Women and children cowered, each muffling their fear in their own way. Some wept quietly, others stared wide-eyed at the doorway, ready to run at a moment's notice. The nameless woman felt her heart twist. Every sound from outside sent a jolt through her body. A memory tugged at her mind, a courtyard under a blood-red sunset, the hammer of drums, and a sudden, deafening uproar. In that remembered chaos, she turned to see someone dear, struck down. She tried to summon the image, but her thoughts fragmented again, leaving only a rush of dread. She rose from the mat, ignoring her shaking legs. "Zoe. I can't just." Zoe grabbed her arm. "You heard Gamba. It's not safe out there." But, the woman's voice wavered. A sensation like an invisible hand clenched around her heart, compelling her to act. For all her vulnerability, she knew she could not sit idle while the people who had sheltered her risked their lives. Before Zoe could protest, a pained shout echoed from right outside the hut. The woman froze. Instinct took over. She dashed to the entrance flap, pushing it aside just enough to see the outside. The darkness was split by flickering torches. She glimpsed a knot of Azawi warriors locked in fierce combat with men dressed in black tunics. Indeed, the black tunics bore strange white markings, almost like painted symbols. Her gaze flickered to the ground where an Azawi villager lay unmoving, a spear lodged in his side. She gasped, feeling bile rise in her throat. This was real, this was war. Yet there was something oddly familiar about the raider's attire. Her breath caught. Have I seen those markings before? The swirl of recognition threatened to consume her. Gamba's voice rose above the din. Hold them back. Don't let them pass the fields. He was fighting near the village boundary, staff in one hand, a short blade in the other. A swirl of dust and shadows obscured her view. Zay grabbed her from behind, trying to pull her back. Come inside, please. Fear laced Zay's every syllable, but the woman couldn't tear her eyes from the unfolding battle. Amid the confusion, a raider broke free from the skirmish, sprinting toward the huts. In one fluid motion, he hurled a spear. It sliced the air, heading straight for the communal hut. She didn't think, her body simply moved. She threw herself forward, shoving Zoe and a small child aside just as the spear impaled the ground where they'd been standing moments before. The impact sent a shudder through the packed earth. Gasping, Zoe stared at the spear's quivering shaft. Tears filled her eyes. You saved us, she breathed. Are you hurt? Heart hammering, the woman shook her head. Her gaze whipped back to the man who had thrown the spear. He stood only a dozen strides away, dark eyes peering from beneath a hood. A second spear was poised in his grip. In the flickering torchlight, she saw the faint emblem painted across his tunic, 2 circles joined by a single slash. And just like that, a fissure opened in her memory. She staggered, pressing a hand to her temple. The forest, the courtyard, the swirl of red cloth, it all blended with the image before her, forming a cohesive whole. She knew that symbol. She'd seen it in her nightmares. That symbol and those black tunics had been there the night everything fell apart. Stop, she shouted, her voice ripping from her throat with surprising force. The man hesitated mid-throw, as though startled by her command. She stumbled forward, ignoring Zoe's pleas to stay back. Don't do this. He snarled something in a guttural tone she vaguely recognized. A flicker of fear and rage passed over his features. Then he lifted his spear once more. But suddenly, Gamba was there, appearing at the raider's flank with lethal grace. He swung his staff, knocking the attacker off balance. The man stumbled, and Gamba disarmed him with a swift kick. Breathing hard, Gamba pointed his blade at the raider's chest. Zay ran to help the wounded near the hut, ushering them inside. Meanwhile, the nameless woman stood rooted, eyes locked on the terrified raider who had nearly killed her. Her mind swam with half-formed memories, each one hammered by the clash of steel and the shouting villagers. Gamba glared at the invader. Why do you attack us? He hissed. But the man's eyes flicked to the woman, still wide with disbelief, as though her face stirred some echo in him as well. Amid the swirling dust, more torches flared. Azawi warriors had gained ground, pushing back the raiders, though the fight was not yet won. Chief Ebony's voice bellowed commands as archers loosed arrows into the night. Her ears rang from the tumult, and she realized with grim clarity that many had likely been wounded, or worse. In that moment, something inside her snapped, releasing a flood of memories. They crashed over her like a tidal wave. She saw herself standing in a courtyard of red clay walls, her home. Her mother, dressed in a flowing wrap of red and gold, placed a delicate chain around her neck, smiling with pride. Drums pounded a celebratory beat, she was turning 18. Elders from the Ndi clan offered blessings, calling her by name. Nalia. Yes, Nalia. That was her name. She remembered the sound of it echoing in the courtyard, accompanied by cheers. She remembered the swirl of color from the dresses, the floral garlands. She remembered her father's solemn face as he told her, as our only child, you must carry on our bloodline with honor. Then, in another flash, chaos descended. Shouts, the clang of weapons, the terrified screams of the women. Black tunic raiders poured into the courtyard, brandishing spears marked with the twin circles and the slash. Her mother rushed toward her, eyes fierce, pushing Nalia to run. Go. Hide. But Nalia hesitated, wanting to fight. She saw her father try to rally their clan's warriors, only to be overrun by superior numbers. A blow to her head knocked her unconscious. When she woke amid smoke and blood, everything was in ruins. Her memory was hazy, but she'd stumbled into the surrounding forest, fleeing for her life. Somehow, she'd ended up wandering deeper into the wilderness, traumatized and alone. Nalia, she whispered aloud, tears streaming down her face. That's my name. I'm Nalia of the Ndik. Her knees threatened to give way, but she forced herself to remain upright. Gamba was still confronting the raider, holding him at blade point. Around them, the surviving black tunic men were retreating into the darkness, vanishing like specters. They had likely realized they were outnumbered or that their surprise attack had failed. A few remained pinned by Azawi spears or arrows. She closed her eyes for half a heartbeat, summoning the courage she'd once possessed as the proud daughter of her clan. Gamba, she said, her voice stronger now. Let him speak. Gamba frowned, not lowering his weapon. He tried to kill you, and our people. I know, she said quietly. She stepped forward, kneeling beside the disarmed raider. But we need answers. She switched to the raider's tongue, a dialect she hadn't known she could speak until this moment. Who sent you? She demanded. Why do you raid the Ndik and Azawi villages? The man's eyes narrowed. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. He spat on the ground. We do as commanded by our warlord, he muttered. He seeks to expand his dominion. The Ndik resisted. Anger flared within her. Her clan, her family, had tried to defend their homeland, only to be overwhelmed. She glanced at Gamba. It's as we feared, she said in the Azawi dialect. A warlord organizes these attacks. The Ndik must have been his first target. She turned back to the raider. Where is my mother? My father. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. Are they alive? He hesitated. We took prisoners, he said at last. Leverage. Some may still live. Then, defiance hardened his features. But you will not stop our warlord. His alliance grows daily. She clenched her fists, tears threatening once more. My people, she whispered. They might still be alive. A tremor of relief and terror coursed through her at the same time, relief they might have survived, terror at how long they might remain captive. Gamba exhaled slowly, stepping back from the raider and signaling for an Azawi warrior to bind the man's hands. Chief Ebony approached, his broad shoulders streaked with sweat and dust from the fight. He surveyed the battered raider with an unreadable expression. We have them on the run, but we lost many good people tonight, he rumbled. What will become of us if they return in greater numbers? Nalia, she was sure that was her true name, lifted her head, meeting the chief's gaze. She realized everything she had learned so far pointed to one conclusion: her memory loss had cost her clan dearly, and these Azawi had suffered, too. The warlord's campaign would likely continue unless someone stopped it. I am Nalia of the Ndik, she said, her voice wavering but resolute. The weight of that identity settled onto her shoulders like a mantle. My clan was attacked. We, my family, are likely held prisoner. We cannot leave them to their fate. If the warlord is not stopped, he will come for Azawi again. Chief Ebony regarded her with something akin to pity. You are certain? She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I remember everything now. My parents, the night I fled. The raiders who wear black tunics destroyed our home, but I believe some of my people yet live. His gaze shifted to Gamba, who nodded in support of Nalia's words. Then the chief turned to the circle of villagers, some sporting fresh wounds. A hush fell as all eyes turned on Nalia. "What do you propose we do?" Chief Ebony asked. He did not sound dismissive, rather, he spoke with the gravity of a man weighing the fate of his entire village. Nalia's hands trembled, but she did not waver. "Gather allies," she said. "Warn the neighboring villages. Stand together against the warlord. If we can rescue my people, and any others captured, we can break his power. We might not win alone, but united, we have a chance." Ebony studied her, then at last nodded. "I will call a council of elders by sunrise. We will decide how best to unite our clans." He jerked his chin at the bound raider. "We should learn everything we can from him and any others we captured." Though the night was dark and grief weighed heavily on the village, a faint spark of hope flickered in the eyes of the Azawi people. A bleak hush settled over Azawi in the aftermath of the attack. Torches revealed the extent of the damage, huts scorched by thrown torches, wounded villagers huddled in pain, and the grim task of burying those who had perished. Zay helped the woman tend to the injured, tears slipping down her cheeks as she realized how many friends and neighbors lay bleeding in the dust. Nalia felt the weight of responsibility crushed down on her. In only a few days, this village had become like a second home. She had shared their food, their shelter, and now their grief. The guilt gnawed at her, because she suspected that if she hadn't lost her memory, she might have warned them sooner. She might have prevented some of the suffering. But regret would help no one now. She squared her shoulders, approaching Grandmother Aba's hut. The old wise woman had been tending to the wounded throughout the night, guided by her apprentices and the glow of the hearth. Inside, the air was stifling, thick with the scent of herbs and the copper tang of spilled blood. Grandmother Aba looked up from where she knelt beside a whimpering young man with a deep gash in his thigh. Sweat beaded on her wrinkled brow. "Child," she greeted hoarsely. "You remember now, don't you?" The question came out more like a statement, as though she could see the truth in Nalia's eyes. Nalia nodded, throat tight. "My name is Nalia. My clan, we were attacked. I ran into the forest. That's how I ended up here." The old woman regarded her with a mixture of sadness and what might have been pride. "So the forest spared you, so you might bring us all a warning." Tears threatened again. She blinked them back. "Grandmother Aba, I need to help these people." "Your people? They've been nothing but kind to me. I can't let them fight alone." The healer's gnarled hand reached out to squeeze Nalia's wrist gently. "Your spirit is strong. When I first touched your forehead, I felt a hidden power in your soul. You were born to lead, child." Nalia lowered her gaze. "I'm just one woman. I don't know how to fight a warlord, or how to unite clans." Grandmother Aba released her, slowly rising. Despite her age, she stood with surprising steadiness. "Even a single spark can kindle a mighty blaze if it falls upon dry tinder," she said. "Your courage can inspire others to stand together." Nalia didn't fully understand, but something in the old woman's words resonated. She bowed her head in gratitude. "Thank you." Outside, she found Gamba leaning against a charred post, bandaging a cut on his arm. She approached, help in her eyes. "Let me see," she said softly, nodding to his wound. He shrugged but didn't protest when she carefully tied off the bandage. "I'm glad you're safe," he murmured. "And I'm glad you remember who you are." She swallowed, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry I didn't realize it sooner. Maybe if I had," her voice trailed off, and she gestured at the chaos around them. Gamba shook his head. "Don't blame yourself. They would have attacked regardless. At least now we have some warning, and we know more about our enemy." He studied her expression. "You mean to face them again, don't you?" She nodded, forcing her shoulders back. Yes. We have to. My clan, my family, could still be alive. And if we do nothing, the warlord will keep attacking villages until no one is left standing. The determination in her voice surprised even her. She had always prided herself on being strong-willed in her earliest memories, but now that trait burned with fresh intensity. Gamba exhaled. Then I'll fight at your side. He offered a small, resolute smile. Azawi stands with you. She gripped his hand, overwhelmed by gratitude. Thank you. By first light, Chief Ebony had convened a gathering of elders in the village's central clearing, what little remained intact. Smoke curled from the huts as the villagers gathered in a solemn ring. A few battered, bound raiders knelt under guard, scowling at their captors. Off to the side, the dead were carefully laid out, their faces covered with woven cloth. Mourners stood by, some weeping quietly. Nalia moved to the center, her knees weak but her heart resolute. She wore a fresh wrap one of the villagers had offered her. It fit loosely around her body, worn but clean, and somehow made her feel more like herself again. Her hair, though still tangled from her days in the forest, was braided back by Zuri's deft hands, a small gesture of respect that calmed her frayed nerves. Chief Ebony raised his arms, silencing the murmurs. We have all suffered a great loss. These raiders bring war to our doorstep. Yet I believe we have a way forward, with the help of our guest. He bowed his head toward Nalia, then stepped aside, giving her the floor. She took a steadying breath. My name is Nalia of the Ndik clan, she began, voice carrying across the hushed crowd. We, too, were attacked by this warlord and his raiders wearing black tunics. They destroyed our home, killed or captured my people. I barely escaped with my life. For a time, I lost my memory, wandering the forest until I found my way here. The crowd was silent, save for the rustle of breeze through the thatched roofs. She pressed on. But last night, I remembered who I am, and what I must do. My people live under the threat of this warlord, just as you do. He will not stop with the Ndik or with Azawi. If we stand alone, we will be crushed, one village at a time. But if we stand together, we can unite our strength, protect our lands, and rescue those who've been taken. She glanced at Gamba, who nodded supportively, then continued. I know we ask much of Azawi, especially after losing so many lives. But I have seen your courage. You fought bravely against the raiders. If we can join with neighboring villages, gather every tribe and clan willing to resist, we can form a force strong enough to drive the warlord out. Chief Ebony stroked his chin, eyes dark and thoughtful. It is a risky path. But do we have another choice? He surveyed the assembled elders. Some wore expressions of doubt, others of steely resolve. A wizened elder with white hair spoke up. Our scouts say other villages have also faced attacks. If they learn we are uniting, they may indeed join forces with us. He inclined his head at Nalia. Where would we gather these allies? Nalia remembered enough of the terrain around Ndik lands to know there was a larger settlement near the confluence of two great rivers, a neutral space used for trade and festivals. There's a place called Jani Crossing, about 2 days' walk to the north. My father spoke of it as a common ground where even rival clans respected a truce. She paused, voice tight with emotion. Father. She prayed he was still alive. We can gather there. It's near the heart of the region, so any village that wants to join can reach it. Another elder raised a question about provisions, arms, and transport for the wounded. Discussion sparked throughout the crowd, with villagers offering ideas for sending messengers and forging alliances. Nalia found herself swept into a wave of earnest planning. Despite the grim circumstances, an undercurrent of hope spread as people realized that unity might be their best chance. Finally, Chief Ebony raised his staff. Very well. We Azawi shall embark on this journey. Let it be known we will travel to Jani Crossing by week's end, gather allies, and plan our stand against this warlord. We do so in memory of those lost and in defense of our children's future. A chorus of agreement rose. Some villagers still wore expressions of uncertainty, but no one openly opposed the plan. Their survival depended on collective strength and the knowledge that they were not alone. In the days that followed, Azawi worked tirelessly. Messengers were sent to neighboring villages, carrying word of the planned gathering. Volunteers built litters for the wounded to rest upon during travel, while others gathered dried provisions and water skins. The warlord's captive raiders, thoroughly questioned, had revealed little more than a name, Rash-an. A man from the far north, rumored to be ruthless in his ambition. Nalia, Gamba, and Zai helped wherever they could. Though Nalia's heart ached with each funeral rite performed for those who fell, she also found solace in the resilience of the survivors. They bandaged their wounds, shared their meager supplies, and still pressed on. A spirit of solidarity emerged in Azawi that reminded Nalia of the unity her own clan had once known. At last, the morning of departure arrived. The rising sun bathed the village in soft gold. Despite the swirling sorrow, a renewed sense of purpose filled the air. The elders had decided to leave only a small contingent behind to care for the fields and those too injured to travel. Everyone else, warriors, families, and volunteers, would journey together to Jani Crossing. Nalia stood at the forefront with Gamba and Zai, scanning the crowd of brave souls. Chief Ebony approached. Nalia, he said, handing her a spear. The polished wood felt both foreign and oddly comforting in her grip, the spearhead gleaming in the dawn light. May it serve you well. You carry the hope of two clans now, the Ndik and Azawi. She bowed her head. Thank you, Chief. She traced her fingers along the shaft, feeling the carved symbols etched into it. Though she lacked formal battle training, she would use it however she must to save her people. Gamba stepped close, adjusting his staff across his shoulders. Ready? Nalia set her jaw. Yes, she said, turning to look at the ragtag procession behind them, men with bows slung over their backs, women carrying children and bundles, elders leaning on canes yet determined to go as far as they could. This was not merely a journey, it was a statement of defiance. We will not be broken. With a final nod to the village watchers left behind, they set out into the soft glow of morning. Nalia cast one last glance at the hut where she had awakened from her memory's darkness, feeling a pang of gratitude. She was no longer that lost, frightened girl. She was Nalia of the Ndik, and though her heart still quivered with doubt, she marched forward. She didn't know if her parents were alive, or if the warlord could truly be stopped. But she had discovered something deeper than memory, purpose. And that, she realized, was more powerful than fear. The path ahead would be long, fraught with danger. Yet Nalia, once lost and nameless in the forest, now led a band of determined allies toward a promise of unity. In her heart, she believed their combined courage could overcome the tyranny of those who chose violence and oppression. And though the final confrontation with the warlord was still to come, Nalia had reclaimed her identity and her will to fight for those she loved. In the end, her story reminds us that even when you feel lost and stripped of everything you once knew, hope can still be found in community and unity. We are all stronger when we stand together, forging bonds of trust and compassion. Memories may fade, but the essence of who we are endures, carried in the kindness we receive and the courage we show in return. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead us to discover our true selves and our true purpose. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more captivating African tales, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Share this video with friends who love stories of courage, mystery, and discovery. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.